Hi everyone, very welcome to yet another episode of Captain Speaking, together with me, Petter Hörnfeldt, and...
Welcome everybody back to the podcast. My name is Ben Watts, and this week we're talking about runway overruns. We're talking about call sign confusion, and we're also talking controversially about visual approaches. So stay tuned for that. But Petter, you look refreshed.
I am. You know that feeling when you get back from holidays and there's a mix of like, I want to grab onto things and get stuff done and really work hard, and not consequential part that just want to continue the holidays forever. I'm banging there. This is my first day back in the studio, and I've been working on scripts today, have some meetings, and we're doing this in the evening now. It's been a fantastic holiday.
Nice. So you flew back, was it from Stockholm?
Yeah, that was the only part of my holiday that wasn't fantastic, I have to say.
Oh.
Yeah, no, here comes a little rant. It's very rare for me. I try to avoid those. But Stockholm Arlanda, which is the biggest international airport that we have in Sweden, and is supposed to kind of be the crown jewel of Swedish airports, it's in a shambles. Like it's not good at all. And unfortunately, when we traveled home in the evening, and we were really, really unlucky. There was a combination of, I think, the airline we flew with, Whirling, which had a bad evening, basically, both when it came to check-in, which took forever, and I mean forever. We couldn't believe it. We came to check in our bags, and normally Whirling is really good because you have these self-check-ins. So you basically just, if you have everything sorted, which we tend to do, you just check your bags in, you self-scan it, it goes away on its little what's it called? A little conveyor belt there. Yeah. And then you just go to security. So you don't have to stand and wait for a physical person to do it for you. But in Arlanda, you have to, like back in the good old 80s and 90s. And it took like we were there 2 hours and 15 minutes before, and they opened 2 hours before on the dot. Okay, fair enough. Still plenty of time. And I kid you not, it took half an hour to get 2 sets of passengers checked in. And you could see the panic starting to build through the queue, because it's 200 people in the queue to check in. They're starting to look like, okay, so the first people took half an hour. That's now only 1.5 hours until the flight leaves. So with this rate, they're going to have 5 of us checked in by the time the airplane leaves, So everyone started to get a little bit frustrated, including me. I try not to, but when you see that kind of thing, it's really... It affects you, especially late at night when we've been traveling the whole day. And then we were luckily, number 2 in the queue. So they basically let us in. We ran over towards security because we hadn't eaten anything. We needed to eat before the flight. And then we had paid 45 euros extra to get fast track in security, because we know these kind of things can happen, so we plan for it. We come to there. There's a guy standing in security. He looks at us. We scan our boarding card. It says denied. And he's like, yeah, no, that airline doesn't pay for that here in Arlanda. Oh. So now we paid for nothing, essentially. And that's not the airport's fault. That's Whirling's fault. But anyway, so we were like, okay, so we run through the normal security then, which took further half an hour or something to do, because they have only the old scanners. You have to pick out everything, the computers, your phones, your electronics, and the kids have tons of electronics. Got through there. And then we thought, okay, let's go for the restaurant now, get something to eat, because, it's 9 o'clock in the evening. We need to have something to eat. Ran up to the only restaurant they have in Terminal 2. And when we got up there, it was 19:45. I went up to the counter to kind of give a quick order. We need 4 hamburgers. And they're like, no. The kitchen is closed. It's too late now.
At 7:45 in the evening.
7:45 in the evening in the biggest airport that we have in Sweden. Now, given it is Terminal 2, it's a smaller terminal. But still, who does not, offer hot food or any type of food after 7:30 in the evening? It just... Like at that point, I could feel that vein popping out. Like, what do you mean? There's no food available to buy for money?
Yeah, bit of food rage thrown in as well.
Yeah. So we just there's nothing you can do, obviously. So we ran down. We went and bought those some bags of chips and some sandwiches and water or whatever, and that was the dinner. And then obviously on top of that, we had, I think, 1 hour delay on the departure. So that's 10 o'clock now departing, and it's a 4-hour flight. So now we were landing at around 2. And once we got to Barcelona, the bags didn't come for another hour.
Oh my goodness.
So I left Barcelona airport at 3:15 in the morning for the 1.5 hour drive that we have back to where my mother-in-law's house is. So we were in bed at like 4:30 in the morning. And we were supposed to be home at 1:30, you know.
Oh, that's tough.
It was one of those things, and I could just feel that all of that frustration that we talk about on the podcast.
Yeah.
We talk about angry passengers and
Yeah,
how
yeah.
people can get really rude and stuff, and I could feel it bubbling up inside of me, you know.
Oh man.
But fortunately, I mean, obviously, I know why these things happen. So there's nothing you can do. There was French air traffic control strikes, as always. That was the reason for the delays for the departure. They had come in with a delay because of the same strike. So it was just a continuation of those kind of things that tend to happen in the summer.
Yeah. Oh, that's rough. Well, at least you're back.
Yeah. Apart from that, I had a wonderful holiday, and
Good.
that's rant over from my part.
Good.
But to be honest, Arlanda, they've been working. It's like a building site, and it's been for years, and it's projected to be for further years. And I don't understand. It's kind of the gateway, the phase that people get when they fly into the country for the first time. You would think that they would want that to work and look as good as possible. But,
Oh well, mate, let's hope things improve. They can't go much worse by the sound of it. So
yeah. No, they will. I hope so as well. What about you? What have you been doing this week?
I'm good. Yeah, I've been working in the Simmel this week, which is I'm doing some of the more. I'm kind of what my favorite type of training this week. So I'm doing a lot of type rating. We've got a load of cadets joining the airline. So I'm taking this particular group from what we call full flight 1 to full flight 4. So they would have done 12 fixed base sims up to this point. And yesterday I did their very first full flight sim experience, which is pretty cool because
that's awesome.
They were literally buzzing as they got in the seat. They're like, oh yeah, I can't wait for this. And the motion comes up and they go, oh, I can feel it. You know,
it's the, like, I know we've talked about this a lot of times here in the podcast before, but that feeling that you get as an instructor as well, the energy that you get from the students when you realize how motivated they are and how fun this is for them and what an experience it is. It's amazing.
I think that's one of the best bits, isn't it, about being an instructor? You get to share in so many firsts, don't you, in so many different ways, and it's brilliant. So, and they're really good. They've done so much prep. They're literally ready to go. We have a great brief, and so today we were in the joys of airspeed unreliable, runaway stabilizers, rapid depressurizations, raw data flying. They had a busy session today, and tomorrow we're doing upset prevention recovery training, which is also a lot of fun.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I mean, I remember talking to, because this is different, and I want people who are not in aviation to understand this. When you go into a simulator session as part of your type rating training, when you're learning how to fly this particular aircraft, the 737, you need to be really prepared, right?
Yeah.
When you've done other types of training, maybe you've done your car training and stuff like that, people are kind of used to the notion of, I'm going to a lesson, and in the lesson they are going to teach me something. And that's true to some extent. But when it comes to the type rating, it's so compressed. There's so many procedures and so much things that you need to do that unless you have pre-studied every single thing that you're going to do on that session and been with your sim partner, dry flying it in one of these paper tigers, mock-ups, unless you've done that, you will not get what you need out of that session. Because we, as instructors, when you get to full flight 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, we're basically the guides that bring you through a scenario which you have prepared for, and then you have misunderstood something, and we will straighten that out, make sure that you understand it. But it has to run. There's no way for us to stop and explain every single part of what you're about to do.
No, every sim session will be 10 hours and you'd have a 10-hour brief and beforehand. There's only so much you can do. And it's rare to find a cadet, I think, where they expect everything to be just given to them but occasionally you do have to have that conversation with them, take them to one side and go, because it's so clear, isn't it? When you get into the brief and you start, facilitating this brief and go, okay, tell me about a runaway stabilizer. Tell me why it might happen. Tell me how you'd react to it. well, how the aircraft would present it to you, what kind of faults would you see, and how are we going to, what memory items? And they start looking and going, and you can tell immediately that they just don't have any, they've not read up, they've got no idea. And immediately you'll be like, oh, this is going to be a long day.
Yeah.
So, and what's hard, I think sometimes if that's, I say this is really rare, but if you've got maybe a really strong cadet and a weaker one, the other cadet can start getting frustrated at that point as well, because they've read up on it. And they're looking across going, dude, what are you doing? You know, we should have gone over this.
Which, to be fair, is, I mean, when you do a typewriting together with someone, this is it's kind of the responsibility of both. Right? Okay, you can't spoon feed your partner. You know, that doesn't work. But you are supposed to sit and work these things through before the session. So any weaknesses would become obvious to the other typewriting cadet. Yeah. At an earlier stage. And if you've been sitting one person studying by himself and the other one, she has studied with herself, well, then that's a problem as well, because you are supposed to do this as a team.
Together, yeah.
But
I remember living and breathing it. I remember when I had my sim partner, we had the same apartment, we'd eat together, have breakfast together, in the car together. Everything was memory items. What are we doing here? Whatever.
Oh, we had it. I remember I did my typewriting in Amsterdam. And we were down further south for the fixed base stage, and then we had the full flight stage up in Amsterdam. Yeah. And I remember we had rented this little kind of like hotel / Airbnb type of thing. Me, my partner, and another crew. We were all Swedish, and we were sitting there jamming. And they had that problem. The other crew had that problem where one of the cadets did not. He invited his girlfriend down, and then they went for dinners, and he kind of had a little bit of a holiday at the same time, while this other cadet did not. So he was sitting with us and doing the training, and I remember the frustration. I remember how, and it started going wrong pretty quickly as well.
Yeah, it will do.
There's no way around it. There's just so many systems, so many procedures, so much that you need to know in order for you to pass this typewriting, because you go from knowing basically nothing to knowing everything there is to know theoretically about this aircraft in like 2 months.
Yeah,
it's incredibly. But I'm glad that we got into talking about that, actually, because this is kind of a little bit what we do in the virtual 737 course that we have created, you and me.
Yes, we do.
We not, of course, into the depth that you'll get when you do a typewriting training, but we go through how we read a checklist and why it's done that way. We do that for an entire flight. So if you're sitting out there and you're interested, maybe you don't want to become a pilot, but maybe you're a simulator pilot on your home PC, or you're just interested in how this works, you should check it out. And you can do that at virtual737course.com. And if you use the code CAPTAIN, if you decide to buy it, you'll get a 20% discount. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm really proud of that course.
It's great. And talking about feeding off enthusiasm, we've had well over 1,000 different people take up on this course now, and the feedback has been phenomenal. People, you know, because I remember being in that position where I was simming, and you're just hungry for information, and everybody out there is just devouring, and it transforms the way they fly. We've had so many emails in going, I used to be scared of flying on VATSIM because I didn't know quite what to do when this approach was here, and now it's just given a degree of confidence that's transformed the way their enjoyment of using the sim.
Yeah, which is what we wanted. We thought about, like, we instruct this all the time. Why wouldn't we do it in a virtual way to give this kind of knowledge to people that are not in the industry, but maybe they're on the way in, and it does help quite a bit when you get the understanding behind it. Differences are there. Yeah, what MCAS does, for example, a lot of people are interested in that.
Even with the demonstration.
Exactly how we are actually training it now. Yeah. Anyway, on to today's real headlines. Did you see the videos that are running around about what happened to that Vietnam Airlines flight in Munich the other day?
I did. Yeah, I posted a little video myself on that, and it went like yours. It kind of went viral pretty quickly, and it was, for those of you I'm sure have seen by now, but there was a Vietnam Airlines 787 that had a very close call in Munich. Yeah. Do you want to kind of lay down the background to this, Petter?
Yeah. So basically, it's still very early days. The investigation has just kicked off, but what we know so far is that it happened to a Vietnam Airlines flight 34 on the 15th of August, 2026. They were using Munich's runway 26 left, which is one of the longest runways in Europe. It's 4,000 meters long, which is 13,100 feet. And just for like to put that in context, my home base in Girona was 2,150 meters long, right? Half the length of that. And we took off from there with a 737 without any problems. And there's been 767s taken off from there. So around 2,000, 2,500 meters tends to be the norm. 4,000 is like space shuttle alternate kind of length.
It's huge.
Yeah, it's huge. Anyway, they started from the very beginning of the runway, which also sometimes, we do what we call intersection takeoffs, which is where you don't use the full runway, but you take off from one of the intersections. But these guys did not. They took off from the very beginning, and they started accelerating down the runway, and we don't know exactly what happened, and that's what we're going to be discussing. But what we do know is that they continued the entire runway length, and then when they ran out of runway, they still continued. They overran some approach lights that were in the stopway, which is a paved part of the runway, which is not to be used unless for emergency. And then they continued out into the grass, and then finally, about 400 feet beyond the runway threshold on the other side, they got airborne, just with like these huge clouds of dust being kicked out behind them. They then climbed up to about 10,000 feet, where they contacted air traffic control and said, hey, we've got some indications of some issues with the tire pressure. Would like to come back. So obviously they must have felt what happened. They must have seen what happened. And now on top of that, they also had indications that, when they ran over the light, we don't know exactly what caused the tire pressure issues, but likely when they overran the approach light, something happened. So they then came back in to runway 26 right, I think.
Right. Yeah.
And they did 2 low approaches down to about 1,000 feet above ground. And they did that in order to let ground observers with binoculars check out their landing gear to see what the status was like, which is a good call, because you want to make sure, like if there's only damage on one side, for example, the aircraft is going to behave differently when you land. If it's damage on both, maybe it's not going to be so different, but it's good to know. It's part of the PIOC model to actually get information. And this is the I stage of the PIOC. And then they came in and landed. They stayed airborne in total for about 2 hours. And by the way, they also stayed in holding to dump some fuel, which is something that long-haul airliners like the 787 can do in order to reduce their landing weight down to, good and safe levels.
Yeah.
They came in, they landed, and initially there was talks about them evacuating using slides, but from what I've gathered, they apparently just stopped on the runway and got out of the aircraft using normal stairs. All of the crew, all of the passengers, no one was hurt.
That was a good call.
Yeah, that was a good call. And because, like normal, you and I, we know now that there's going to be an investigation, and we never start to speculate on things especially when people gotten hurt. But in this case, no one was hurt, which makes it a little bit different. So I would like to hear what just your initial thoughts when you saw this.
Well, yeah, the initial thoughts, I think as a lot of people here that have seen this footage, obviously you're looking at this and going, how on earth does that happen? Knowing that it's a 4,000 meter long runway. I know they're going to be heavy because they're going off to Vietnam. It's a long flight, so they're going to be heavy, but 4,000 meters. So immediately I start thinking of, maybe incorrect thrust, incorrect takeoff performance. It's worth pointing out here that for every single takeoff we do, we calculate takeoff performance that's unique to that particular departure. So on that particular day, on this particular aircraft, with this particular load, fuel load, weather conditions, temperatures, pressures, we calculate a takeoff performance. So we know exactly what thrust to set for departure, so we get the required takeoff performance. So initially to think you're using 4,000 meters of runway tells me, initially you start thinking, well, maybe that was incorrect. Have they set the wrong thrust? That's happened before.
It's happened before. And I mean, I have done at least one video recently, 2 videos within the last year, where the performance procedure was done correctly, but using the wrong weight.
Yeah.
About 100 tons difference in weight.
Yeah.
That's happened not only once, but at least 3 or 4 times that I can think of at the top of my head. That there's just been a juggling of figures, a little bit of time pressure, and someone has put in 230 tons instead of 330 tons, for example.
Yeah.
Right? So those kind of things, And also entry errors into the flight management computer is fairly common.
Yeah. Now, I mean, but that in my mind at least got dismissed fairly quickly, because if you're hurtling down that runway and you know what an acceleration should feel like, don't we? We know how it should feel like. You know what kind of a point you would expect to rotate. If you're getting beyond that and you can see your airspeed, you can see VR up here, your rotation speed, and you're still a long way to go, and you're looking at the end of that runway going, that's not very far to go. Even if you got your takeoff performance wrong and you've got a reduced thrust, there's nothing stopping you adding thrust up to the fixed D rate that you've calculated it for, basically straight arming the power or going up to whatever thrust limit you've calculated for, and getting airborne. That's always an option. But then recently we saw pictures of skid marks towards the end of the runway.
Yeah.
And I think this is now getting interesting as to what could cause this.
Yeah.
You saw those?
I saw them, and just recently we released a short that was based on our initial information from yesterday. Basically, I did that short yesterday, and the graphics was added today. So just today, I was started to get messages from friends and people like, "Have you seen this? There seem to be skid marks." And just to clarify, what we mean by that is actual tire marks from what looks like braking on the runway. Okay, before the takeoff. And that is odd, right?
It's very odd.
It makes the whole thing different from anything that I think I've ever seen. What do you think? Like,
I mean, initially.
By the way, now we're into the real realms of speculation here, but it will be interesting since no one got hurt. What do you think?
Yeah, initially, when I saw the skid marks, there's one particular picture where it just showed the right-hand side of the runway, so from the center line to the right-hand side, and all I could see were these two black skid marks going off onto the grass. And initially I thought, well, maybe it's some kind of like braking system failure, that there's a partial locked wheels issue, that it's locked two of the rear wheels on the bogie, which has, increased the takeoff distance, reduced the acceleration. But then I saw a picture where there was, or a video where it was on both sides of the runway. So there's symmetrical.
Both sides of the center line. Not
both sides of the center line, sorry.
Yeah.
We're showing you both bogies are braking, and they're locking the wheels. They're not just braking, they're locking wheels here, partially at least. The chances of having a brake failure on both sides independently, that doesn't sound about right to me. So what are your thoughts on that?
So similar to yours. I'm also starting to get emails from people saying that they've seen like when something happens in the aviation industry and something technical happens on especially newer aircraft, they kind of send out auto information, and that if it's an anomaly, it's getting sent out to all stakeholders, which might be other airlines as well, or other people using the 787, or investigators and people that should know about it. And apparently, allegedly, I should say, because I haven't seen it myself, there was indication of high brake temperatures just after the departure of this aircraft, which again would be indicative of the brakes being applied for the takeoff. But of course, it couldn't have been applied from the very beginning, because they wouldn't have gotten anywhere. So if you then continue that thought, you get someone braking just before the end of the runway. And if you look at it from a CRM and from a human factors point of view, it then becomes a little bit more plausible that some kind of initial mistake has been made. And we all know that an accident doesn't happen unless there are several different things that goes wrong in a row. So let's say that some kind of issue with the performance has been made. Now, let's say then that you let the aircraft accelerate and you do what you said. You see the end of the runway starting to come. You haven't reached V1 yet. Then you'll get that horrible couple of seconds where, do I reject or do I continue? But of course, a rejection is once you've taken that decision, it's a very set kind of procedure that you need to follow. You need to do certain. You don't just brake. You apply brakes. You make sure the speed brakes up. You make sure the reverses are up. You make sure you have max manual braking or RTO braking, whatever. You do things in a set, but there is a world where you could see someone just getting a split second panic and just applying brakes. And they see, oh, we're not going to be able to make it. Brake, and then no, and then release it again and go.
Yeah, and because it only happened from the video that I saw, it only happened right towards the very end of the runway where they're in the stopway. You can see the yellow chevrons which demark this area that you shouldn't normally be on.
Mm.
And that's where it really starts to develop as they're approaching the end there. So yeah, you can imagine that human factors of just a human seeing the end of a runway and just applying the brakes almost involuntarily, just a reaction
Yeah.
to nothing else.
Or one of the pilots doing it and the other pilot not.
Yeah.
You know, like there's a plethora of different ways that this can happen. But my gut feeling is that this is not a technical issue. That this is more of a human factor issue, and this is where it's going to be really, really interesting now to follow the investigation as it goes forward, because it might, as always, when you sit and speculate like we do now, you might look like proper fools. In a while, this is why we put these kind of warnings out saying that this is speculation only, which can be fun when no one gets hurt. But I'm really looking forward to see what the initial investigation will say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the 787 braking system, but I can't imagine it having a system where one failure could affect two wheels on the aft of each bogie. That's the only kind of technical failure I could imagine where it suddenly failed and it partially locked brakes. But
and there's another side to this as well, and that is if there would be any indication of this being a technical failure causing this, I think we would see a lot of reaction from the industry.
Yeah,
like
true.
we'd see. It's been 2 days now already. You'd see definitely like warning signs, people stopping, like, oh, check out this. This is an emergency airworthiness directive coming out or whatever. But I haven't seen anything of that.
No, I've not heard of anything either. So, and maybe it's worth pointing out, particularly for those of you that don't fly, is how we control the brakes on the ground. You know, think how are the brakes applied, and how could it be done potentially inadvertently as well?
Correct.
Because the brakes are done by your feet, and they're done individually. So your right foot does the right set of brakes, left foot does the left side of the braking system, and the brakes are actually on the pedals, but the pedals are made up of two parts. So the base of the pedals that you push control the nose wheel steering and the rudder typically. So when you press the right pedal, it will move the nose wheel to the right slightly and it will move the rudder. It doesn't have a huge amount of authority. So in the 737, just if you went full right rudder effectively, you'd get 7 degrees of nose wheel movement. So it's not a huge amount. It's designed for straight line, keeping you on the center line effectively. But if you lift your heels off the floor and you touch the top of the brakes, the toe brakes, that's how you would then apply the brakes. And you can apply them generally symmetrically. You'd press both kind of together. Now, we teach when they're on the takeoff roll, heels are on the floor. So when your heels have got to be on the floor so your toes are not touching the brake. Because what we don't want is we're pressing that rudder pedal to keep us on the center line. We don't want inadvertent brake pressure, just dabbing brakes. It's going to destroy your takeoff performance, heat the brakes, damage tires. So heels should be on the floor to prevent that. So to get the brakes working, it's a physical act of lifting your heels, lifting your feet up and pressing, and looking at the skid marks, they were both pressed, if they were pressed symmetrically.
Yeah.
So it would be a very deliberate motion, maybe subconsciously, but it would be a deliberate moment.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about myself, I can see myself being there, accelerating towards, you see the end of the runway coming up, and maybe somewhere in the back of your head thinking, no, we need to stop this, but without actually going the full way into a rejected takeoff.
Yeah.
So, but that's the thing. The problem here is that, as I'm sure a lot of you who listen knows, is that we calculate specific speeds, right? So generally at 80 knots, we do just a general check, 80 knots check, to make sure that our airspeed indicators are working, that the other person is still with us and things like that. But that doesn't have any function other than just doing that initial check. Now, if that comes really late, that is an indication that 80 knots should be coming. Why am I not hearing that? We're accelerating really slowly, and after thousands of takeoffs, you do get the feeling like, okay, set takeoff thrust set, indications normal. And now you know approximately how many seconds there should be until you hear 80 knots, check. If that doesn't happen, it's the first indication. Something is off here, right? But then you get to V1, which is the decision speed, at which point the decision of either rejecting the takeoff or continuing it needs to have been taken. Yeah. Right? So that's the decision speed, as they say, but the decision really has to happen before in order for to start it. But of course, if you have calculated with the performance of the thrust setting being a certain amount, but then you don't have that, or you've done it with the wrong figures, you might not reach V1, the decision speed, in the available runway. Right? This is the conundrum. And if that's the case, if you reject the takeoff, you also don't really know if you have enough runway left to stop. Because the V1 speed is calculated so that if you reject the takeoff at that point, you do have enough to stop the aircraft safely, right? Or to bring it up single engine into the air. But if the performance has not been done properly, all of that is off, and you don't really know where you can safely reject or not.
No. And I think going back to what you were saying, Petter, about not being a technical issue, just thinking about it in my mind now and looking at the video, is that obviously we don't know why it took so long to get to that point. You could argue, there's an argument there that maybe the brakes were dragging the whole way, hence the long acceleration. So that's a possibility.
Yep.
But if you look at the video, the skid marks are initially, as you kind of get towards the end of the runway, they're only just developing. So those skid marks are only just developing at that point. So either whatever the technical issue was getting worse, or it was, as you say, a human factors. But we don't know what caused them to get to that end of the runway, what caused them to use 4,000 meters of runway. I think the skid marks are potentially a completely separate issue to that.
Exactly. It's either it is or it isn't. Either it's like you say, a very small technical fault that is doing something super weird that I've never heard of, but most likely there's two separate issues here.
Yeah,
at least.
yeah, I think so.
And
Well, it'd be really interesting.
It's going to be very interesting, and I feel for the crew involved here, because getting through this, first of all, that was very close, very, very close. Right,
there were trees, weren't there, at the end of the runway?
Yeah, when you see dust being thrown up like that as they're accelerating still and they're still on the runway, it's just a berm or some kind of mast, something in the way that, because normally the approach lights, which it was in this case, they're elevated a little bit in order to continue on the same line as the runway as the ground kind of falls off.
Yeah, and the other thing as well that's lucky, fortunate for, is that normally the localizer antenna for the other runway that you're coming in to land on would be at the end of the runway, sometimes on a mound of dirt or like a concrete block to give it the elevate. That was, I mean, if that was closer again.
That's what we saw with the JU accident.
Yeah, exactly.
About a year ago. So that's one thing. So you know, once they got airborne, the shock to the system, the scare, that is one thing. And then they actually did, from what I can see after that, they did a very good job. They did all of the stuff that they needed to do. I'm not sure why they climbed up to 10,000 feet, but after that, when they decided to come back, they did all of the things that a good crew is supposed to do. So I would, it's very bad.
And one thing we've not mentioned yet is the tail strike.
Oh, because true. We haven't mentioned that.
No, they had a tail strike, which is expected, because I would imagine my understanding of that, speculating here, would they get to the end of the runway, they see the trees, they've run out of runway, they're now on the grass, they just yank back on the control column to get this thing airborne, and they've rotated probably too quickly and hit the tail on the ground. But yeah, you talking about 10,000 feet, the reason that isn't kind of flagged in my mind is because when you have a tail strike, we don't pressurize the aircraft.
Correct.
And if you don't pressurize the aircraft, we can't go above 10,000 feet, because then hypoxia starts coming in and we need oxygen masks. So they would have had to have manually depressurized that aircraft to reduce the stress on pressure bulkheads that might have been damaged and so on. So it would have been probably unpressurized from then on. So yeah, dumping fuel, they're up there for an hour and a half, I think, dumping fuel when they... it was a tough day in the office for them. But yeah, it'd be fascinating to see what the root cause of this was.
And listen to the CVR.
Yeah,
it would be really interesting to know what was said on the cockpit voice recorder.
Do we get the transcript on the initial report?
No.
On the preliminary? That would be later in a year or so.
That would be on the final report for sure, if it's even released. Some countries release it, some countries don't. I mean, Canada, for example, famously never release it. And so some countries only release parts that are really pertinent to what happened.
Yeah,
but it's a fascinating. Those initially, I thought, just like you, there's some kind of performance issue here. But when I saw those skid marks on the runway, it became a whole different thing.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
let's see.
That was the first major one, and I would love to hear what you guys think as well. And as always, when it comes to this, listen to what the official channels are releasing. They will be coming out with an interim report, normally within a couple of weeks. I would imagine, since the aircraft is fine and since everyone was fine, that it might go even quicker than that. And only from them will you know what actually happened here. So no matter how much you and me sit here speculate, hundreds of other internet pilots who's going to sit and speculate on, nothing is true until you hear it from the official investigation.
Correct.
Right. The next thing is a little bit funny. This is the two American Airlines flights that were coming in and going out of Phoenix on the 13th of August.
This was bizarre.
They had the same call sign, and not only did they have the same call sign, they also were on the same, physical location at almost the same altitude, which is like a fever nightmare for traffic control, but also for us pilots. So, unfortunately, when it comes to the audio recordings, we can't really share it here because there's some copyright issues with that. But I would encourage everyone to go out just and look for it. American Airlines, same call sign. You'll find it immediately, because this was bizarre. And what happened, just to keep it short, was that this one American Airlines with call sign 2482 was climbing out of Phoenix on its way to Chicago. And this other American Airlines 2482 was coming in to land in Phoenix. So the departing one had been cleared to climb to 9,000 feet, and the arriving one had been cleared to descend down to 10,000 feet, so they would have 1,000 feet separation. And then this poor air traffic controller needed to start giving them more climb and descent clearances. But of course, if you give a clearance with two flights with the same call sign that are that close to each other, the chances that they're going to pick up each other's calls and actually do the wrong thing is astronomical.
Yeah, it's going to happen. Yeah. Guaranteed.
And it did happen.
Yeah.
They did. The first couple of calls were like, no, wait, what? Who? like a Monty Python sketch. And the controller he solved it in an ingenious way. Basically, he said, American Airlines 242 on departure, maintain 9,000 feet. Mm-hmm. American Airlines 2482 on arrival, descend and maintain 10,000 feet, continue. And then they read back in that way as well. But how can something like this happen?
It's got to be a flight planning glitch, hasn't it? Because I know from flight planning, the way that flight plans work, particularly in big airlines, is that there's a software or part of the software involved where they will look at where flights are, where they should be in airspace at the same time. So not the same call. I've never heard of the same call sign, but where you have very similar call signs, they try and avoid that as best as possible. So if it was American 2482 or American Airlines 2582 or 2583, they would avoid that.
Yeah.
So flight 2583 is in a completely different part of the world, while 2582 is in this part of the world. And the software checks this. It should cross-check to make sure that these call sign confusion threats are minimized as much as possible. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen. No. When air flights are delayed and suddenly an aircraft is in a bit of airspace it wasn't planned to be in, we do suddenly find very close call signs. Yeah. I've had it where I've had my call sign, the numbers are the same as the numbers from a call sign from another airline.
Yeah.
So
that one is hard to catch, because obviously there's a cross-check between those two systems. So if you have let's say Butter Airlines 2482 and KLM 2482, there's no way of avoiding that. So
no. And ATC are normally pretty good at that. When I've checked in, they'll say, Butter 2482, just be advised there's a similar call sign on frequency. So at least it kind of gets you thinking, and sharpens everything up.
That helps a lot, because once you have that, once you know that, all right, was that for us or not? Not only do you listen more carefully, but also you confirm if you're not sure. So that helps a lot. And also, I remember from when I was flying with my previous employer, that if there was any similarities, Butter Air 2482 and Butter Air 2483, for example, they would remove one of them and add alphanumerical number to it as well. So it would be Butter Air 24 Alpha Bravo. Yes. Instead, in order to make sure, even though the actual flight numbers might have been very close, the call signs were not.
Yes.
So that system, but that only happens within the airline, which of course should have happened here. And the fact that they have, this is what is really bizarre to me, because normally when you have the same flight number, it's also the same route, right? There would have been if there would have been two flights going from Phoenix to Chicago, and one was super delayed, it shouldn't happen anyway, because normally they're staggered. But that would make sense. But the fact that they were going opposite directions, that to me, I think it was some kind of system glitch somewhere.
It's got to have been. It's just duplicated it for some reason. But obviously the threats of this are very real, aren't they? Even similar call signs, because if you take someone else's call sign that you think's for you, things like level busts start happening, air proxies, it all opens up a whole can of worms that you've got to be so careful of.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And at the end of that, if you look at this video, you'll hear that the air traffic controller said, I'm going to file an MOR on this. So it's mandatory report.
Occurrence report, yeah.
And that just means that this is going to be highlighted to the FAA, and the FAA is going to look into it, most likely contact American Airlines and ask, dudes, please explain how this could happen so that it doesn't happen again. And it is really important that these kind of things get reported.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So go and give it a listen. It's an interesting one. It'll make you smile.
It'll make you sweat. It gave me a little bit of a headache to start with, because before he'd figured out how to deal with this, there was so many. As a pilot, you sit and listen to this, and it's like, oh man, dude, how this is not good.
Oh, God, no. You need a stiff drink when you got home that night.
That's true. So then you wanted to talk a little bit about visual approaches.
Yes, I did actually. I put a post up on LinkedIn recently. I thought I'd start using LinkedIn a bit more. So I thought knowing the algorithm, it likes any engagement, comments. It'll start promoting it a little bit. So I deliberately chose a topic that I knew would divide opinion and get people talking, and it didn't disappoint.
Rage baiting.
Well, I don't know. I don't want to say rage bait. I want to say stimulating conversation. How about that? So anyway, I put a post up and saying, basically, I put a picture up saying in speech marks, cleared for the visual approach. And underneath that, is this the first phase or first step towards an unstabilized approach? Ooh. And yeah, and I did a bit of text behind this now. And I kind of put up, these visual approaches, really, when you think about them, are the simplest type of flying we can do. It's what you do from day one in a little Cessna 152 is a visual approach, and it should be on paper be the simplest thing. So how can this cause us a problem? So I go on and say basically that these have caused problems. They've been causal in a number of incidents, big incidents, as well as probably a huge amount of non-reported or internally reviewed incidents where maybe it's led to a go around or an unstable approach. And broke it down into my view of 3 reasons why these can cause problems. Primarily, a lack of briefing. Secondly, the psychological weird link between the idea of a visual approach and manual flying, plus maybe not thinking about the threats associated with it. And it's very much geared towards a last-minute acceptance of a visual approach. I kind of go and say, look, visual approaches aren't bad, but we've got to think about them. Anyway, I go through this on this post, and the comments didn't disappoint, as you can imagine. There was a lot of comments on there from people going, basically, dude, if you can't fly the aircraft, if you can't see a runway and fly towards it and land safely, you shouldn't be in the cockpit, and all of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's the classic. That's the good old seat of your pants aviation. Obviously, someone who says that did not understand the post that you made.
No, and I replied to lots of comments, kind of trying to, go, look, this is why I'm saying this is what I'm doing here. Go check it out on LinkedIn if you want to see the full thing. You'll smile as you go through the comments. But the whole point for me is that, again, the reply or a lot of the comments, again, inadvertently, they maybe didn't realize that it really highlights that maybe subconscious link between a visual approach and manual flight. Yep. They don't have to go hand in hand, because a visual approach just means we're flying an approach with the Mark 1 eyeball. We're not using an ILS or an NDB or any fancy equipment. We're flying it visually. And it doesn't necessarily mean we have to disconnect. And why is disconnecting a bad thing? Well, it depends on how familiar you are. The root cause of what I was trying to say here is that these can cause problems because of it's more of a matter of being unprepared for what you're about to do. Yep. So if you're flying at an airport that you're very familiar with, you've done it a million times, both crew experience, then flying a visual and disconnecting, and you've done it a million times, you've got that familiarity and it will be fine. But if you're flying somewhere you're not that familiar with, and all of a sudden, you're briefed for an ILS, and then ATC say, oh, look, there's, if you're visual, you're cleared for a visual. And then you go, oh yeah, I'll accept that. Autopilot disconnect, hoon it around the corner. that's where things go wrong.
Yep.
And that's where you've got to be very, very careful. And I think one thing we have to be careful of is ego, because you know there's that kind of thing. Well, if you can't fly the aircraft to a runway, why are you a pilot? You got this captain looking at you, or the FO looking at you going, yeah, but grow a pair, dude. You got to go and do this.
But
go.
But you already pointed out a super important thing that I think a lot of people that do disconnect and just think, like you just said, I should be able to do this, I will do it. Is you have to think about this as a team again, right? And we are obviously used to flying with very inexperienced co-pilots, and they will not be able to follow you through what you're about to do, which means that even though you can do this perfectly, if you would make a mistake and miss something, which is very likely when you're now focusing all of your attention visually, that you forget a checklist item or forget to seat the cabin down or forget something, you're going to forget something. The problem here now is that the co-pilot that is supposed to be there, if he's pilot or she's pilot monitoring, they're supposed to be there relaxed with a low workload. It's now the workload has shot through the roof. They're trying to figure out what it is that you're doing and what you will be doing next, and they're trying to monitor everything. Are we too high? Are we too close to the runway? Is everything being done? And you're now reducing all of those safeguards. All of those safeguards just thrown out the window. It might well work. You might be Chuck Yeager's lost son, and you might do this great, right? But it will be more of, it was lucky because you didn't make a mistake, because your colleague would not have picked it up. Unless you're flying, like you said, with a very experienced person that have done this hundreds of times and knows how to monitor these kind of situations.
Yeah. And funny you should say that, because that's exactly what I put in one of my replies, is we have to be mindful. This was to a very experienced captain that said basically I should be able to do this, no problem. And it wasn't saying I couldn't. It was more the fact that, we have to work with who we're with. And that's exactly as you said, Petter. And the thing in my mind, the way I approach these things and the way I teach these things is look at what some of the world's best, what would be regarded as the world's best pilots. I mean, we had, if you haven't seen it yet, a great podcast with an ex-Red Arrow, Dan Lowe, great guy, super experienced. But one of the things that I picked up from listening to him was the amount of preparation that they do before every single sortie. Bearing in mind, these are the best pilots in the world, or among the best pilots in the world. They've flown these maneuvers countless times, but yet these should be the people that on paper, according to that logic, they should just be able to get in the jet, strap in, go, fly this perfect thing. But they don't. They go in and they brief, they visualize, because they know the importance of leaving nothing to chance, of preparing so that everybody knows what you're going to be doing and when, and there's no surprises. So based on that, we should be following that same mindset. And it's the same for any human thing, isn't it? If you look at athletes that run 100 meters or hurdles or swim, they've done it a million times, but yet they visualize. You see them, don't you, visualizing this in their mind, because they're preparing themselves for it.
That's the thing. And it's when we look at these different personality types, there's a personality type that's called macho.
Yes.
Right. A macho person would say what this person said to you in the post, right? It would say, you should be able to, I can do this. You should be able to do it. We should do it because we can, right? But that's not a trait that we actually want in the cockpit, that's something that you want maybe in a fighter jet cockpit. Maybe. I'm not even sure today if you want that in a fighter jet, right? Because you want to think through all of these things. And like you said, if you've been at top of the sun or before top of the sun, and you said, today is a great day, super clear weather, it's very likely that we're going to end up with a visual approach here. Now, in case we are going to do a visual approach, it might happen between these distances, whatever, that's where we normally see the runway. What I'm going to do then is that I'm initially going to turn in a bit of a shortcut, because that's what we want with a visual approach. I'm going to make sure that we are at the correct altitude. These are the altitude rings that we put in at 10 miles. This should be at 3,000 feet and below 200 knots and so on. I want you to monitor that. And then eventually I'm going to disconnect. Okay. I want you to speak up if you feel that this is not, going, if you see something that's out of order or whatever. But you do a proper briefing. Where are you going to do what? And you might even continue using the autopilot for a while if you fly with someone that's really inexperienced. But I'm going to do this in heading select and vertical speed.
Yeah.
And
And you can even simplify. You can even, if you've got something programmed in the FMC, you can use LNAV and VNAV.
Yeah, you can program a visual approach and fly it automatically using LNAV and VNAV.
At least getting you onto
I can hear people, the old schoolers, wincing when they hear that. Like, what?
Yeah. But, and I get that.
But it works. And you should see the difference. Because sometimes I've done that in the sim where I've flown a visual approach the old school way with someone new. And I was like, okay, we're going to do it the old way. Disconnecting, turning off, or recycling the flight directors so the flight directors disappear. And then I'll just eyeball it and I'll take the gear and the flaps as we go and ask him to reduce the speed as we go. And you can see how they're struggling and following through and like, oh, look, they're just trying to survive basically until we're down on the runway. And it went fine. And then you do it the way that we just explained, where you have briefed it before and you have put some LNAV points in and you just connect them in a nice kind of racetracky way. And you go LNAV, VNAV, set down the MCP altitude to your MDA.
Yeah.
And then you just fly it. And you could basically hold a cup of coffee and you can do all of the procedures. The workload doesn't even move up one bit. And the whole idea with doing that exercise and showing that is to showing that, yeah, this is not particularly macho. It probably doesn't look very cool, right? This is not something you're going to do a LinkedIn post about, right? But it is probably the safest and the best way of flying this approach to make sure that you're stabilized.
Because what's the benefit of reducing the workload so significantly by doing it that way is, well, the benefit is you've increased your situation awareness. You're not now focused on flying this airplane. You now have got the capacity to monitor the aircraft while you're looking out of the window. Because the other point that I mentioned in there is that this is a visual approach and it's very difficult to fly an airliner completely visually. You've got to be in pitch, thrust, flaps. You're inside a lot. Whereas if you're allowing the autopilot to do the initial turn on to final, you can be much more visual. And the other point to bear in mind here is if we just randomly accept a visual approach, we've got to think about things that, sometimes there's minimum altitudes to join an approach. Sometimes you could be turning into areas where there's VFR traffic. There could be terrain. There could be the instrument approach might be slightly offset.
Yeah, not to mention the fact that you've probably flown VNAV up until that point.
Yeah,
that means that the VNAV has calculated that you have a certain amount of track miles. So if you all of a sudden disconnect and do a shortcut, you are automatically high. Like so you already there. You're now struggling to remove some of your energy in order to get back onto a stabilized profile.
Yeah. So it was really interesting looking at the comments, and I know there's a million different ways of viewing this, but it was really just to highlight the reason why here. And I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to hear what you say, but I think I have two sets of comments on this. I think that what we just said about a well briefed visual approach where you use your automatics as much as you can, there's just no question that is the safest course of action, which is what your passengers are paying you to do. Now, are there situations where you still should disconnect and be able to fly it manually? Absolutely, because you need to have the skill set. You need to know not only how to fly it in a simulator, because we do practice that a lot, but also how the real aircraft flies when you have disconnected and you are flying it manually. But the places to do that is at your home base with minimum VFR visual traffic around, with no storm clouds or bad weather anywhere, when you know that today is a perfect day to do this. I am going to do this now. Are you happy? You're also happy. Perfect. Let's practice a little bit, because now you are still practicing the hand flying bit, but you're not increasing the risk of anyone.
I'm a massive advocate of that. I mean, as instructors in the sim, we don't fly as much as if we were on the line. So when I do fly and the conditions are right, I manually fly as much as I possibly can. A, I love it. B, it keeps me sharp because I need to be able to do what I say and what I teach. So I love flying. So I'm a massive advocate of that. And I just want to, my main was to separate that mindset of just because you're suddenly cleared visual last minute doesn't mean you've got to be a hero, disconnect everything and hoon it in. And be mindful of the fact that briefings and preparation is the key to a successfully flown approach, whichever type of approach you fly.
Yep.
And yeah, but let us know.
Yeah, let's see. I'm guessing we're going to get some comments on this as well.
Oh, we will for sure.
Right. Do we have any questions that we can answer before we finish this off?
Yeah, let's go here. So there's a good question written in here, and it says, I've got a question. Do you ever recreate historic accidents or incidents in the simulator, like disabling pitot tubes without notice, forcing them to cross-check readings? I really wonder the success rate of saving Air France 447 or US Airways 1549, etc.
The answer is yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
We don't try to completely and 100% replicate it, but we put our crews into scenarios that are similar in order to gain the most training value out of it.
Yeah, it's to build competence in these kind of scenarios, and we've done all sorts. I mean, all airlines have, haven't they? From double engine failures after takeoff to strange combinations of failures as well. Like I said, we're teaching different types of pitot failures today, like the Air France one. We did 3 different types, from angle of attack sensor failures that affect the pitot readings to one sensor blocked, all of them blocked, how they fly the aircraft now with pitch and power. So we replicate a lot of these scenarios and often combine them, not necessarily to train for that particular scenario, but to build the competence and the resilience to deal with similar scenarios should they be presented with.
Because that's the whole point. The whole point is to make sure that they have the toolbox needed in case because it's very unlikely that they're going to come up against exactly the same thing. They're going to come up against a combination of a lot of other factors, and then we need to have built-in resilience in them so that they remember that, I don't know what's going on. Fly the aircraft. Okay, how do I do that? If I set that thrust level, that thrust value, and this pitch, the aircraft will fly. Okay, good. Now, next step. You give them tips like that so that they can get through whatever happens, not any particular thing.
No, and the good point about anchoring these in real world events is it really adds another dimension to the training, because sometimes if you're just giving people a combination of failures, sometimes you can get the impression that, this is ridiculous. How are we going to get this, that, and that together? But when you reference it to a real world event that they're familiar with, you go, this is very similar to what that crew on that night would have experienced.
I mean, that was the whole point of starting to do accident investigations on Mentour Pilot. Like, I realized that we did it every time that we have recurrent training. You would have some kind of case study that you had to study at home, read through what happened on the flight, and also you sat together with your instructor and looked through the case study and talked about the different difficulties and stuff. And I thought, this is excellent. I can do this, but with the general public. I can use the same kind of cases and explain really complex topics in a way that is engaging. Like, you listen because something is going to happen. You need to understand why. So this is the origin of Mentor Pilot's crash series.
And I think it links nicely back to what we're saying about a visual, in that every person that started a visual approach that ended up best case in a go around or worst case into an incident, they started that approach thinking they could do it with no problem.
I've been there. Oh my God, I've been there. I remember flying with an American captain who was like seriously good, like really, really good. And I think he wanted to teach me a lesson. And I was really young first officer and was coming into Alghero in Italy. And as you know, there you can get some really badass shortcuts. And I accepted a shortcut. Like, I think he asked me, like, should we take it? And I said, yeah. And we took the shortcut, and we were like, like ridiculously high. And he told me, okay, so disconnect and sort this out. So I disconnected and I started taking, bringing the speed back, bringing flaps out, bringing the speed up to what the maximum allowed was with that flap in order to get down. And meanwhile, he was like, you could just hear him laughing. And at some point, I think he even took up a camera. Took a picture. I sorted it out because this happened really far out. So we were super high, but before we were down at 2,000 feet or whatever, we were stabilized again. But I had to sweat through it. And I just remember him like,
That's a good lesson learned. I think we've all been there in some way or form. But
I think
so
I'm trying to remember if I've gone around from one of those. I'm sure I've had as well.
Yeah, I've gone around for months, years. When I was an FO, funny enough, it was a similar. I was going into somewhere, and I was very frustrated. I was getting close to command. Actually, I remember, and it was somewhere I hadn't been before. And I don't remember the full lead up to it, but I remember accepting. It was a similar thing. He said, happy to accept, and I said yes. And it cut off too many track miles, and I was too close. And as soon as I was kind of committed to this now, I realized this isn't going to work. So I kind of spoke to the person that said, look, to the captain, yeah, I've pretty made a boo-boo here. This is most likely going to be a go-around. So let's have a think about the go-around. And in the end, we got to the gate or before the gate, and it was no way we're going to work. We were high, so we just threw it away and flew a go-around, came back around, did it again. But I learned a very valuable lesson that day.
You have to. I think you have to do some of these things in order to recognize them early. Especially, I love for first officers to experience it, because then they have seen it when they sit in the left seat.
Yeah,
when they are the ones that are going to have to take the ultimate decision.
Yeah, and it's certainly influenced the way I treat vectors and shortcuts and so on now, because once you've been bitten, you're not going to make that mistake again.
No. I absolutely.
Yeah.
That was a great question.
Let's have a look. Another one here. So, actually, which kind of ties in quite nicely here. And it says, Dear Petter and Ben, I'll summarize this. Been following the podcast for a while, since day one. Really enjoy it. Keep up the great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm reaching out because a friend of mine who flies for an airline recently brought up something that really surprised me. He mentioned that there seems to be a subtle or sometimes not so subtle pressure among pilots driven by pride around energy management. There you go. So it links exactly into what we've just said. He noted that when crews find themselves hot and high, there's a strong hesitation on the radio to admit it. Hesitation, yeah. Pilots do almost anything to avoid asking for a longer vector or doing a 360. I'd love to hear your take on this. Is this pride something you've observed, or how can crews better normalize speaking up over looking slick on frequency? So, yeah, ironically, it's very similar to what we've just been speaking about, isn't it?
Yeah, there's no question. There is pride. There is pride. You cannot ignore that. It's. I don't think anyone wants to get into a situation like this, because it means that you have not planned properly. But also similarly, there should be nothing that stops you from asking for, well, no, I need more track miles here, or I need to do a 360 if that is appropriate, which it's not always. I should point out.
No, it's not.
No. The 360, just to get you an idea, that's when you're on final and you realize that you're too high, and then you just make a 360 turn around, and then obviously you'll be losing altitude as you do, and then you get down, hopefully in a better position. This is something that most airlines have very strict rules for when you're allowed to do. You have to be above the MSA, normally outside of 10 miles, and there's loads of different rules around it. But there's no, it comes back to the same thing. You ask for track miles on an early stage, or you go around.
And I often reframe this in the sense that, I think a lot of we have ego, and I think pilots, you need a certain level of ego. You need to have that confidence in yourself. You can do certain things. When it's gusting 50 knots, you need that self-belief that you can do it, and obviously you can. But we've got to that ego can be also very, very dangerous. But I reframe that pride, because if you could, the way I tell this to other pilots after an event would be, if you could see that scenario on one of your videos, Petter, for example, in the early stages of this developing, and you saw a crew go, no, I'm not happy with this. I'm not going to take that shortcut. Even though you may have got yourself into that position, and it's not a great position to have got yourself into, it takes a far bigger person and bigger pilot to say that than it does to try and carry on anyway.
Yep.
Try and make this work. So you can have a kind of pride in the fact that you said no.
Absolutely.
You've admitted that mistake. That's not going to work.
It's probably one of, if there's one thing that I could teach new pilots, it's that. Realize that you're a much better pilot for speaking up than for staying quiet. You're a much better pilot for recognizing that you've made an error and rectifying it than it is for trying to sort it out until you're way too low and it becomes a much bigger thing.
Yeah, I mean, the power of verbalizing, something I speak a huge amount about in my Airline Pilot Mentor program, but the power of speaking up can never be undervalued. No. It's huge.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And I think that's a fitting end to this episode. We're up to 1 hour and 4 minutes. As always, time flies when you're having fun.
It does.
Keep sending in your questions as comments if you're watching this on YouTube, or if you're listening to this on any of the podcast platforms. You can send us at an email, which is, I never remember, it is... captains@mentorpilot.com. captains@mentorpilot.com. So send us that and we will have a look at it. And if it's something that is worth discussing and we think will make a great, then we might do a whole episode. Otherwise, we'll just try to respond to it as soon as we can.
We do. And if you've enjoyed this and you want to support us, a subscribe and a like would certainly help as well. So if you have enjoyed it, we'd appreciate that. But
And
on that note,
if you haven't enjoyed it, a subscribe and a like still helps.
Click anyway. Yeah. But yeah, have a great week, everyone. We'll see you in the next one. Take care.
Bye-bye.